I'm just checking in. Explain.
Welcome. Welcome to Community of Christ with the Shenandoah congregation in San Antonio, Texas. Community of Christ is a welcoming and loving faith community. We proclaim Jesus Christ and promote communities of joy, hope, love, and peace. Please take a moment and like our video, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss anything, and comment to tell us where you are joining us from. Keep our contact details and share with us how we can minister to your needs. Find more information at www.seaofchristsa.org. If you would like to view past services, follow this link on our website. We welcome you, we acknowledge you, and we love you. Shalom.
Well, good morning, everybody.
And now Lane Talcott.
There you go. Thank you, Carol. Nice to be here, running around. I just came back from teaching a Sunday school class. I got here in plenty of time. So it's nice to see you all. I did snoop around and look at you as best I could. It's always nice to be back at Shenandoah, even if it's only virtual. So I'm going to talk today about love, but really love as it pertains to joy. So in John 15, Jesus says, "As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete." You know, joy is something we can experience, but usually it involves something else, another, like nature, actions of a person, and so on. It doesn't come from our status, our gender, our ethnicity, or even our intelligence. Happiness is different, and it's that feeling you get from an ice cream cone, or for me, a key lime pie on a hot summer day, or the smell of the interior of a new car. It's that key lime pie for my birthday every year that brings happiness to me, but not joy. There's nothing wrong with happiness, but it's not joy. And it doesn't offer a meaningful life, only distraction. Joy is that feeling you get when you find yourself a part of something greater than yourself, connected in some mysterious way. I want to tell you a story. This last month, I received a letter from a young woman who I barely knew. I met her on a trip. I went to a funeral of a good colleague, and she went with one of my other colleagues. She was his daughter. And she's just starting her college career this year. And her letter that she wrote me describes that she had just dropped out of college in her first semester because of mental health problems. She says in her letter, and I'm quoting, "I just want to feel happy, confident, wise, and good enough again." When I read those words, I felt very sad for this wonderful, very, talented young woman. But then I get myself angry over so many young people today. They're being told that they aren't good enough. They're told that they have to feel a certain way or believe a certain thing, whether it's about their clothes, the way they wear their hair, what gender they choose to be, or their ethnicity. All selfish obsessions. I think we make ourselves crazy over that. In the song, "Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring," in one of the last lines, it says this: "Still striving to truth unknown." And I think that line sums up my last 50 years of life when it comes to Christianity. I feel like I'm continuing to search for the important pieces that bring about a meaningful life, to understand my Creator greater. In Corinthians 1, Paul says, for now, and he's talking to the Corinthians, trying to tell them this is the way it is. This is what Jesus came to teach, and this is the way to practice. But even he points out, for now, in 1 Corinthians, we see through the glass darkly. There's so much we don't see or understand. Paul was revealing that. But remember, not seeing it all clearly doesn't mean it isn't real. We know so little about all that is. Isaac Newton said this. He had a mind that could master profound truths, a brilliant man. One day, someone complimented him on his vast learning, and he said, this is a quote, I'm just a small child, picking up a few pebbles on the shore, while the great ocean of truth stretches unexplored before me. Now we see through a glass darkly. Imagine a creator who has made more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on the earth. Think about that. So much more is in play here than we can possibly know or understand. What a beautiful place this planet we inhabit is. We're called to open our hearts and suspend our self-centered egos to allow for an appreciation of how much we are a part of this great mystery. And it turns out we are already good enough. We are all a part of something greater than ourselves, if we could only see it. And one of our roles in this life, I think, is to demonstrate our love for God through forgiveness, loving kindness, and compassion toward others. Those are all demonstrations of love. And that's how we connect with others and the Creator. It's not being in this camp or that camp or belonging to the red tribe or the blue tribe. It's all about demonstrating our love through God, through forgiveness, loving kindness, and compassion toward everyone. We're all in this thing called life together. A tribal elder named Jimmy Smith, weird name, I know, is part of the I'm going to mispronounce it, the Kwakwat-Sujanex tribe near Vancouver, Canada. And he tells a story of how animals on Earth are all one. He said they look different on the outside, but inside they're all the same. From time to time, like us, from time to time, they would go to a sacred cave and they would celebrate their unity. They would take off their skins, the raven, her feathers, the bear, his fur, and the salmon, her scales. And they would dance together to celebrate their unity, their oneness together. As the story goes, one day a human came by and saw them. They were so embarrassed that they fled. And as the story goes, this was the last time they revealed themselves. We, like them, are connected to the waters, the land, the forests, the atmosphere, the ecosystems, and to one another. Jesus repeatedly spoke of our unity. He identified the self with God. He said, I am in the Father, and the Father in me. He blurred the distinction between self and others. Jesus said, inasmuch as you have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. And inasmuch as you did not to one of the least, you did not to me. His message was that we're all connected to our Creator and connected to one another and to our world. William Wordsworth has a poem that's always been one of my favorite. It laments about how we get so lost in ourselves that we fail to pay attention to what's around us. And the poem is short. It goes, the world is too much with us. Getting and spending, we waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. You might be surprised by what you find when you disengage the you and open your eyes. Look up. Notice all that is and contemplate how you actually are a part of it all, a part of the mystery. We experience God in many ways. Dr. Keltner, in his book Awe, talks about the eight wonders of life in which we can feel awe if we are only ready for it. We can feel the presence of God in our interactions with others, in the mountains, the oceans, and in our thoughts. You know, Paul Simon is now 82 years old. That's scary, isn't it? He's one of the greatest American songwriters of the 20th century, and you carry his songs in your head. Bridge Over Troubled Water, Scarborough or Fair, American Tune, Mrs. Robinson. It was classic after classic. People used to say, oh, you have your finger on the pulse. And Paul Simon says in the documentary that he recently made, he said, and I quote, and I would think, no, I don't have my finger on the pulse. I just have my finger out there, and the pulse is running under it for the time being. How long it lasts is a mystery. Knowing the pulse is there and feeling its vibrations is a gift, he said. Putting your hand out there is the effort. Once he told Dick Cavett in an interview that he didn't know why he wrote the song, Where Have You Gone, Joe DiMaggio? Our nation turns its lonely eyes to you. But he wasn't perturbed by that, not to understand the words. He said someday it would mean something, he thought. It came to be a shorthand way of saying Americans have a sense of lessened greatness and that our heroes are now in the past. On January the 15th, 2019, he had a dream where he was told, you're working on a piece called Seven Palms. He hadn't written anything in a few years. He hadn't wanted to, he said, but the dream was so strong that he got up and he wrote it down. He said, I had no idea what that meant. There is so much yet to know. You know, we only see through a glass darkly. Back to Paul Simon. Gradually, more information came in chords, a sound. Then he started to wake up 2 and 3 times a week between 3:30 and 5 a.m., and words would come to him. He said, I'd write them down, and if I tried to add to them, like, oh, that's a good verse, I'll write a second verse, it would stop. He thought, whatever it is, it's coming to me, and that's all. I just have to wait, and when it comes, write it down. In the documentary, he sings one of the songs that came from this process. Here are some examples of the words of the songs that he wrote down. I've been thinking about the great migration. One by one, they leave the flock. I've been wondering about their destination, meadow grass or jagged rock. The Lord is my engineer. The Lord is the earth I ride on. The Lord is the face in the atmosphere, the path I slip and slide on. You might be familiar with the miraculous life of Louis Zamborini, whose story was told in Laura Hildebrand's book, Unbroken. What an amazing story. Louis was a delinquent, knockabout son of Italian immigrants in Torrance, California, who went on to run for America in the 1936 Berlin Olympics. He then joined the Army Air Corps just before Pearl Harbor. He crashed in the Pacific, drifted in a raft on the open sea for 47 days, came near death. Shark attacks, storms, strafing by Japanese bombers, and he survived it all, only to be captured by Japanese troops. He then spent 2 years in a Japanese prison, beaten, tortured, brutalized as much as a person can and still live. But he came back a hero, shocked to be alive. But his life went from rise to descent, rage, alcoholism, destruction. He couldn't focus enough to make a living. He couldn't stop the downhill slide. And his wife, Cynthia, finally announced she's going to leave him. One day, a neighbor told him about something going on in town, in LA. An evangelist, somebody named Billy Graham, had set up a tent and invited the public. Cynthia grabbed at the straw, but Louis refused. He wasn't going to watch some con man screaming. Cynthia argued for days, and finally she fibbed. She said Billy Graham had a lot to say about science. Well, Louis liked science, so he went grudgingly, and they sat in the back row. And the following quotes are from the book Unbroken. This is what Billy Graham said. Here tonight, there is a drowning man, a drowning woman, a drowning boy, a drowning girl that is lost in the sea of life. Much like that young woman who wrote me. He spoke of the Pharisees surrounding Jesus that day in the temple, presenting the woman taken because of adultery. Moses in the law commanded us, they said, that she should be stoned. What say you? Jesus stooped down and wrote with his fingers in the ground as if he hadn't heard. They pressed. He lifted himself up and he said, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. They were convicted by their own conscience and they left. Jesus alone with the woman. And Jesus asked, has no one condemned you? She said, no one. Neither do I condemn you. Go now and sin no more. What was Jesus writing on the ground? Graham said. Well, Graham suggested Christ was enacting the writing of the facts of our individual lives. He said, God takes down your life from the time you were born to the time you die. He'll see the truth. You're going to say, Lord, I wasn't such a bad fellow. Louis felt something tight. He felt a lurking, nameless uneasiness in his body, like the shudder of sharks rasping their backs along the bottom of the raft. And so began his conversion. He went on to a life of greatness, helping boys as lost as he had been once. Louis had to come to terms with two huge things: the mystery of his suffering, why did this injustice happen to me? And the mystery of his survival, so many others are gone. But you don't have to float on a raft and be tortured to suffer. Everyone suffers. Louis was no different from anyone else in the tent that night. He's still no different from anyone else in the tent or anyone else here today. Throughout his life, Billy Graham had an air of, I'm not important, God is important. He said it didn't seem like a line, but rather a conviction. Billy Graham said once, I'm not going to heaven because I preached to great crowds. I'm going to heaven just like the thief on the cross who said in the last moment, Lord, remember me. And Christ said, this day you will be with me in paradise. Joy comes from appreciating the awe that is all around us. And joy comes from helping others. Joy doesn't come from surrounding yourself with things. Our lives are incredibly linked. We forget that. But as our world shrinks, we become more acutely aware of how a vanishing ice cap might impact our life in the future. Here is a story that I think demonstrates love in the best way. There were two very ill patients in the hospital. There was a window that overlooked a park with a lovely lake. Ducks and swans played on the water while children sailed their model boats. Young lovers walked arm in arm amidst flowers in every color, and a fine view of the city skyline could be seen in the distance. As the man by the window described all this in exquisite details, the man on the other side of the room would close his eyes and imagine this picturesque scene. One warm afternoon, the man by the window described a parade passing by. Although the other man couldn't hear the band, he couldn't see it. He could see it in his mind's eye as the man by the window, told him about all the things that were happening with the parade. Well, days and weeks passed with these two men ill in the hospital. And one morning, the day nurse arrived to bring water for their baths, only to find the lifeless body of the man by the window, who had died peacefully in his sleep the night before. She was saddened and called the hospital attendants to take the body away. As soon as it seemed appropriate, the other man asked if he could move next to the window. And the nurse was happy to make the switch. And after making it, he was comfortable. She left him alone, and he was alone there. Slowly and painfully, he propped himself up on one elbow to take his first look at the real world outside. He strained to slowly turn to look out the window beside the bed. It faced a blank wall. The man later asked the nurse, What could have compelled his deceased roommate, who had described such wonderful things outside the window? The nurse responded that the man was blind and couldn't even see the wall. She said, perhaps he wanted to encourage you. For now, as Paul has said, when we try to understand the mystery of the Creator, we see only through a glass darkly. But if we look around us at all that is, if we can only stop, even for a few minutes, to stop thinking about ourselves and notice the wonder around us, how can you not feel joy? We are all called to share that joy by showing loving kindness toward others. Thank you.